complicated out of all. Okay. By way of review, I think you just said the letter was returned.
He's active from the hearing. He's not on the old list, he's on the new list.
Okay.
We're going to 16385,
6385 page.
page 146.
76. You got a marker over there?
Sorry,
What page are you on?
146.
What section? Sorry.
E.
You know what? What? Our
It's
problem is,
16385.
okay,
16385, number
did you say E?
E.
Prima facie
Prima
evidence?
facie evidence.
6385 is two.
Madam Chair, we back in session.
Yes,
Okay.
I called us back to session,
Okay, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
We looked at this. We asked for some clarification because D and E are separated. E is not part of D. Is that what we were told?
Yeah, I think, and to the extent, let me say if I've misstated or not been very clear or been wrong here. This is a bit confusing. I was taking a more conservative approach that it's not prima facie evidence in this hearing. I still think there's an argument that it is not, but it certainly is some evidence, if not prima facie altogether. So it's clear as mud. And even on our flow chart, it is separated prima facie from the full hearing down here. So basically in this one was returned. There's nothing, if we're on long, there's evidence, if not prima facie evidence, that this person's not entitled to remain registered there.
So the other comment that I made earlier about, you have evidence, and I don't know, because if you start questioning one piece of evidence, do you question all the, it's up to the board. I think Don Mike told you are the triers of fact.
That's
You do determine the law. Contrary to what we talked about earlier, those three folks
That's right.
are the triers of fact and they determine the law. So my concern is, so if we have one official document that the facts associated with that document are, they were not there at this period of time. If you start questioning that document, then you have to question the other document.
You're talking about back in November.
I'm talking about in November, so the challenge that I made
Was in March.
was that they were not residents then.
That's
And
not
the
what they
only
were filed.
evidence that
Yeah.
you had to go by was this housing list,
Right.
okay? That's the only evidence you had. So they cast a ballot in October or November, and they weren't residents according to the only official document you
That's right.
have.
But your challenge was filed in March to remain registered, not to their vote in November.
Okay, so you're right, but if you take, so one thing let me read this to you, and I'm sure we've read this over and over again. If there are facts, let's see, testimony of a person as to his domicile is competent evidence that must be considered but not conclusive to the question. All of the surrounding circumstances and conduct of the person must be taken into consideration. So part of that is they're not here.
Right.
Okay? If there are facts to the contrary, one must consider the obvious bias of the voter in his testimony. Conduct of the challenged voter is greater evidential value than the declarations of the voter. So my position is they were notified and they chose not to come. So if you choose not to come, there's got to be a reason you choose not to come, because I think anybody sitting in this room, if you were accused of something and you were not guilty, you'd be knocking the door down trying to get your good name cleared. Just like that young man, Mr. Henderson. He was ready. First thing this morning, he's ready. I'm ready. Let's get this started. I want to be first because you're smearing my good name. So you got people that are being challenged, and voting is one of the most important things we do.
Well, we would
And they're not here.
Well, we would hope that in the future, anybody that receives a letter that says they've been challenged would take it seriously enough to come defend themselves.
And I believe that the fact that they're not here to defend themselves, you have to take that into account.
Right. I'm looking at evidence we have on Lynette Marie Long,
Yes, ma'am.
that it was returned,
Yes,
which
ma'am.
according to this is prima facie evidence, since it is separated from that preliminary thing.
I'll say, it's, and
It's
this is
part
actually.
of the evidence,
Yeah,
okay.
it is, this
is
is actually to help you and to help us if we
Right,
get sued and
right.
overturned. Very conservatively, it's evidence, liberal take is prima facie. So I'll give you that, yeah.
So,
So, yeah.
And I would say, in this case though, because the letter was returned, there is much more evidence to sustain this challenge because the letter was returned. And the person is not here to do a rebuttal of anything.
yes, ma'am.
May I ask one thing? When we send them a letter, does that bind them to come to this meeting? Is this the one that she's on one list and not the other?
Yes, sir.
When we send her a letter, does that bind her? I mean, we in the best of all worlds, yes, everybody would come. But does that bind her? Does that?
No. It doesn't.
But again, it says conduct of the voter. Conduct of the challenged voter is greater evidential value than the declarations of a voter. And don't forget, in November when they voted, they lied. Based on the official record, they perjured themselves when they stood before an elections board, stood before an elections official, and swore that that was their address.
That still remains to be seen.
Now,
All I'm saying is she voted.
this is the certified,
Yes, yeah, I know.
this
right?
is the certified record by the college.
Okay.
She's not on it.
But she's on the next one.
She could have lived off campus.
She could have lived on campus.
She could be living in Nova Scotia. We can ask her.
But she's registered at the school this Miss Long. She is on that list as of now.
She's on the April one.
April list.
Yes.
But she voted in November. And I challenged her in March.
Well, all I'm saying is we have to deal with it as it stands now.
You can't unring a bell.
I think we
Mr.
need
Scanlon.
to look at, on page 150, D, appearance by challenge registrant. The challenge registrant shall appear in person at the challenge hearing. If he is unable to appear in person, he may be represented by another person and must tender to the County Board of Elections an affidavit that he is a citizen of the United States, is at least 18 years of age, or will become 18 by the date of the next general election. Has or will have resided in the state and all the rest of that stuff.
And she did not receive her letter. Or
It
she
was
sent it back.
returned,
She did receive one of them.
1704, and that was for this, let's see, that was this hearing, I believe, let me double check.
Can you
Yes.
check and make sure?
David
which
said
one it
yes,
is?
and I'm gonna double check, yeah. Okay, just so everybody's clear, the order of probable cause said that she's registered 1704, Weeksville Road, nothing else behind it. That is where notice was sent. That's what's on her registration application, so that part is consistent.
Yes.
And this is in the returned folder, not delivered, so it was returned. Yeah.
So how many notices did we mail her?
One per hearing, one preliminary, one for full hearing.
Both of them went to 1704.
Correct,
'Cause that was
Is
what
there
was on her
is there a box number
registration.
on that?
correct. No, sir. No, this is
No
a straight
box
up,
number.
no. A lot of them do, but this one does not.
There's no box number.
No, sir.
But she did show up on the road as being, living on campus, the last list we had,
In April,
in April.
I challenged her in March.
Well, my thinking of it is this. She, for whatever reason, didn't come. There's no doubt about that. But as far as to take her off the list, now, we don't have an election, we have plenty of time to find out what's going on. Because what we have done is this. It's just plain and simple. She's on one list, but when she registered, somebody registered her. Did she register in person? Or did somebody just bring the cards up?
I don't know what this one,
So,
looks like her signature, I don't know if she came in person, it's got her signature.
She got her signature on it. And she responded to neither one of them. But she did vote.
but she did receive one of them. She did get one of the,
She received one.
she received one.
Which one did she receive? The last one? or the
I
first?
guess
look
the
at the
first
problem.
one. Which one did she get one? She got one of
The
them.
probable cause, or the first letter was mailed 1704 for the probable cause hearing in March. As of the time of the hearing, the letter had not been returned. It was mailed March 7th. We had our hearing the 13th.
Well, she wouldn't be living on campus if she didn't have a room there, right? What I'm saying is, it seems to me, by the mere fact that she had a room in April, and the semester starts in January, and she voted in November of last year, that this is an orderly thing.
When did she register?
2010. 2010.
Oh,
She
2000.
registered in 2010.
Yes. September 9, 2010. This one, to kind of sum up the way I see it, and I'm not voting on or not judging on, there's evidence, if not prima facie evidence, she doesn't reside at 1704. There's counter evidence because she's on the roster now, and so that is for 3 members here to weigh the evidence and vote on.
So one thing I'd like to point out is, don't forget, so during the course of this and the other things we've done, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I count at least 8, 9, 10 where we sent multiple notices. And we got them back from 1704, but they were delivered someplace else. So I will, again, when you talk about the evidence, the prima facie, whatever you want to call it, you have to use your scales. So got evidence on the scale. It says that they shall show up. They're not here. Madam Chair, there's been enough publicity about this. So you've seen who's in the courtroom today. So wouldn't you think if they had a dog in the fight, they'd be here? Everybody else has that wanted to stand up and clear their good name. That's all I'm gonna leave you with.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion. In the matter of Lynette Marie Long, I may or may not get a second. I make the motion to sustain the challenge and remove her name from the list.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
You ready for the next one, Madam Chair?
Just a second.
Okay.
Madam Chair, was that a motion?
Yes.
What about, we
To
didn't address the
remove.
removal?
Lonnie, Ms. Lonnie?
Yes, ma'am.
We just go by last name.
Yes, ma'am, let's do that.
Y'all can get the first one.
And this was number 4 in your book? Is that-
Number 4, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the first is the challenge, the second is his voter registration. He registered in October 2012. And I've got a note that says his registration indicates he registered at one stop, but he's not on the list.
Was he on the first list? He's on both lists?
Is he on that list? Okay.
It's
No, no,
Ig,
oh, it, no.
Igor, Ruby,
I don't think he's on the first
Ovina,
list.
Nani.
I've got the probable cause order showing he was not on the,
Not on the first list.
He's on page 29.
but the first list too, and the second, okay. Okay, that's a mistake.
And that's the one for the fall?
That's it.
What about the other one?
Page 19 on the second
It
page.
shows up in both.
It was on both lists?
Which one is this? Was?
Nani,
Not,
Oh, you know
not,
what, know what was on the
Ig, something. Sorry, it's too hard for me to say. I hate it when people murder my name, so you go for it.
Yes, he is on
All right. Igworabi, maybe it's Igworabi, Nani. All right, he's on both lists. Was his letter returned? Mr. Hobbs.
No,
Not returned?
correct.
And what
Yeah.
addresses?
I'm showing 1704 Weeksville, NR 309, which is what's shown on his application, registration
Seven.
application.
yeah, 09, think about it. It's been a long time since my son.
Does it say when he registered? Do you have that too?
I have
Oh,
it.
here it is, it's on the second sheet, that's right, 10/31/12.
10/2012. So both pieces, you mailed him 2 letters?
I only see one for this hearing, and let's see what the probable cause order says for the,
2% for this one.
there was 2 for this one?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yeah. It didn't have the connector line, you're right, David, yeah.
2 cent and both were not
Like
returned.
your yellow highlight.
Sorry, I
Yes,
worked-
that's
I'll fix
no,
that
my
next
fault, my fault, yeah.
Neither one of them was returned?
That's correct, yeah.
Could you tell us what is?
Yeah, the second one was 7220, Minarda Court, Raleigh. And that's shown on the notice of hearing that went out.
Madam Chair, the basis for this is we're alleging that he hasn't abandoned his first domicile.
Yeah, I need to correct something too. There is a mailing address on there. I'm sorry. There was a 1704 and a mailing address on that. I'm sorry.
I think since he got both of them at 2 different addresses, like the law book was clear that he's supposed to, he needs to be here. It says shall, doesn't say can, maybe, want to, like to. It says shall. And again, it speaks to the conduct of the voter.
You say he's on both lists.
I'd like to go back to the legal presumption. Legal presumption that a student who leaves for college is not domiciled in the college town for which he goes, and it's a rebuttable presumption. The rebuttable part would be, he would be standing here showing you his driver's license. So if you look at Mr. Wright's thing, it gives you a list, 1 through, and I won't read them because I don't want to waste your time. It gives you a list of 19 things. And if you review the list and look at the 19 things, you would be able to ask him any of that, and you would be able to ascertain where he really lives. But by his absence today, that speaks more, that his conduct speaks louder than what he says. He has mail delivered in Raleigh. So if he stood before you and we could question him, and he pulled his driver's license out and it had a Raleigh address on it, I believe that would just about be all we needed to see where he's not changed his address, he's not acquired a new domicile.
Madam Chairman, he registered at 10:31. He voted at 11:06. All I'm saying is, and he's on both of the lists. Had Mr. Gilbert not challenged this person, we wouldn't be looking at it. I mean, we wouldn't be looking at this information. Because you challenged the man. He was on both lists. I don't see where, now, you said you sent it to 2 addresses.
Yes, yes,
And you got to, and neither one of them came back.
correct. That's correct.
Well, is it against the law to have a secondary address? I'm not saying it's, you got a primary and a secondary. Now, which one is his primary and which one is his secondary?
No, you have to determine which one. It's up to the board.
That's right.
It's up to you to decide what his domicile is.
That's right.
Not what his address is, what his domicile is.
Where he's living.
And so I'd like to make a point. This list right here, nobody would be paying attention to any of them on this list if I hadn't challenged them.
That's
And
true.
you found in my favor for at least 54 people, 55, I'm sorry.
This is true.
So because you, if you rob a bank and nobody saw you, that doesn't absolve you of what you did wrong.
But if I'm passing the bank and somebody robs it, and he looks like me, doesn't mean I robbed the bank.
Depends on where you robbed it at, I guess.
There you go.
But my point is, he got 2 notices. The instructions that you said, the challenge registrant shall appear in person at the challenge hearing. He got notified twice.
Mm-hmm.
It says shall, and you can't get around shall. It doesn't say maybe, I wanna, I will if I can, I'm kind of busy today. It says shall.
But it doesn't say he must be here.
Shall means,
Shall
means you'll be here.
Just a minute, I'm sorry about that. What I'm saying is, what we have here is a man having, because everybody has a, well, I don't know about everybody. I know many people have a primary address and a secondary address. Neither one of them came back. All I'm saying is, there's room for doubt here. And I'm
Well, I
not
would tell you-
opposed to letting him stay on the books until we have proof, ironclad proof, that this man is not here. I'm not saying he's here or not, but to just take this away I don't even know whether this person has even gotten either one of those letters. Either one of them.
So
I
I
don't
would,
know, because when you go out to the university, first thing you will find that they send your mail to a box number. You might have moved from one room to another.
or you could have moved off campus.
Well, or you could have moved on campus.
So we don't know.
We don't know. And if I don't know,
But
I'd rather err on the side of caution.
But so Mr. Skinner, I will say to you, you're right, but you can't get around the law. The law, so you tell me that you operate by the law on the board, and I agree.
That's right.
And this board has always followed the law.
And the law states,
He shall be here.
but I don't know whether he, all I'm saying is this. You're not notified until you receive the notice in your hand now. Whether he might have just ignored it, or it's a possibility he didn't get it at all. But I'm quite sure if he's on that list twice, he's in town somewhere, and is probably right over at the school.
So I heard he's probably in town, he's probably at the school, and he's in town somewhere.
And I heard that he's probably out of town.
No, I said, I'm telling you that he
Okay.
didn't leave his first domicile. I have no doubt he's probably going to college. But I'm telling you, he didn't abandon his first domicile. That's what I'm alleging.
And where was that?
In Raleigh.
In Raleigh. I am saying that the law states that a person can come to college, register, and vote
As long as he
as
follows the law.
long as he's physically in that community in a dormitory.
But there's a legal presumption that the student which leaves his home for college is not domiciled.
Well,
And it's rebuttable, and again, it goes back to shall be here to rebut it. That's why we have this hearing.
Yeah.
So, I can't be his lawyer, and you can't be his
I
lawyer.
know I'm not, I am just,
Okay, Mr. Only, what are your thoughts on this, please?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we sustain this chapter and take this gentleman's name off of the N-N-A-N-I.
Can I ask you what's making you decide that?
Well, I think if he'd have had any purpose in voting in life, he'd have been here today, or at least sent one of these letters back.
So to you, his absence is one of the strongest things?
Yes.
Okay, in this thing I'm reading for Don Wright, it says, the determination of domicile depends upon no one factor or combination of circumstances, but upon the whole taken together showing a preponderance of evidence in favor of some particular place of domicile. And in this case, I'm really torn by this case. It's against this person that they're not here. They're not representing themselves, and they are not rebutting anything or answering any questions. So that's a really negative. On the positive side, they're on both lists at the college, and the letters were not returned. because we use prima facie evidence on one of the other things to sustain it because it was returned. It was sent to 2 addresses, one of which is not here.
Madam Chair, can I remind you of the testimony from Mr. Jones, from Mr. Brown earlier, that the college considers the dormitory temporary residence?
But the college director of housing cannot tell what some student's intent is. That's, the student would have to do that.
But
Is
by
that- Can they do that, Mike?
By the very design of the facility and the operation of the facility would give a definition to permanence versus temporary. The very operation of the facility to have a move-in, move-out date and a time that you cannot be in residence there leads, gives you greater credibility to it being a temporary facility versus a permanent abode.
Intent something is very hard to prove, and I think, to play both sides of the coin here. One is, if a student says, I intend to stay in Elizabeth City after graduation, even though the dorms aren't open. On the other side, is that practical? That's a judgment call. But, I know what Mr. Brown says, he can't give an ultimate opinion as to who. He testified they were temporary and the dates and stuff, I understand that.
But the last prong have the intention to make this new residence a permanent home.
That's right.
By Mr. Brown's testimony, the dorm room is not a permanent facility. It's not an apartment, it's not a home, it's not anything like that. It's a temporary place for people to go to school. It's operated as a temporary facility according to the rules of the college. If the rules of the college were they could stay through the summer and roll right up in there, and it would be different. But the rules are not that. In May, they have to leave. They can't come back until August.
Unless they're in summer school.
Unless they're in summer school, and that's a exception. There's exceptions to every rule.
Right.
But as a rule, they have to leave in May, can't come back until August. And by his own testimony, the assumption from the college is, where do they go when they leave? They go home. That was his testimony.
Since Mr. Nani is not here to do a rebuttal to whether or not he lives in Raleigh or if he lives here, I'm gonna second the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
I'll make the motion where you remove Mr. Nani's name from the rolls. Because somebody got that letter in Raleigh, it was not returned to us. And if my son didn't live at home anymore and I got a letter like that, I would make sure he got it.
Ma'am, if it'll make you feel better, I get mail from my daughters now. I make sure they get it within a day or two. And my girls have been gone for a while.
All right, number 5, is that the last one?
Yes, ma'am.
James Webb Jr.
Yes, ma'am. James Lloyd Webb, Jr. He registered in February 2012. He was not on the fall roster. He is on the new roster. I don't have any data as to whether or not his stuff was returned to him.
He's in the delivered book, so there's a presumption that he's got it, I guess you would say, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hasn't been returned anyway, you can say that, yeah.
where did we mail them to?
We mailed to 1704 Weeksville Road, Campus Box 123D, dash VV, which is exactly what is on the registration. Yep, application.
And there are no other addresses on that registration?
No, I'm looking at the probable cause order was sent to 123 DVV. And as of the time of the hearing, it has not been returned. And the notice of hearing here was mailed out on April 3rd.
And again, Madam Chair, I'm alleging that just because you move into the college does not mean that's a permanent change of address. And he was not on the list in the fall list during the November election, and he is on the April list now, so he was not on the fall list.
On his 2212, do you have his registration?
I do.
And I don't want to beat a dead horse. I guess we've been flogging it pretty good. Last prong is the board needs to address. The last prong is the one the board needs to address. Have intention of making the new residence a permanent home.
For the other board members, he changed his registration from Cumberland County to Pasquotank County. What do you see in this case, Mr. Allen?
Very similar to the one we just finished. Here today.
One difference I see is it was not sent to another address. The passport was sent to another address there, and that was not returned. Mr. Skinner, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Madam Chairman, we have proof that he was here in February. We have proof that he was here in November. Wait, we have proof that he was here in May 2012. And we have proof that he was here November 6th of 2012. And you just told us that he changed his registration to Elizabeth City.
difference I see between the two, one of the big differences is that he does not have another home address on his.
I think the only thing that the two hurdles, again, that the board needs to get over is shall, the law says shall, and you have to determine that by finding for him, you will be determined that he has met all four prongs of the challenge. And I will tell you, from the other side of the fence, those four prongs are tough to meet. So I will tell you that that fourth prong is the one you have to get wrapped around, that 1704 is a permanent address. Those are the two hurdles you've got to get by. The law says shall be here. Again, okay, so he didn't have another address, so he got the one you sent him. He's not here. That doesn't allow you to ask him any of the 19 questions on Don Wright's list. It doesn't get you a chance to look at his driver's license. It doesn't give you an opportunity to where you keep your family pictures. It doesn't give you any of those opportunities. So the two things the board's got to get unwrapped around is that permanent? You have to make that determination today, and that's what you're determining, whether 4 months a semester is permanent. And the other thing is, the law says he shall be here. Those are the two things that I will tell Madam Chair, and you have to get around.
This is the first one we did, and there was 17 and 4 weeks for residential, and this is the mailing. Now we need to do a separate one to each of these here, okay? Move here to currently, there's your permanent 17 movie made, and this just went to one as a group, so we didn't send a separate out, 17 and 4, we just sent this group, which I think is sufficient, it covers it, but you were mentioning two versus one in this.
Okay. Now I see what you're saying from the other one. Well, this one only had one.
Because the other was Raleigh, that's why I went to 2 places.
Okay. Call for a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we abstain this violation. Take this away to move on.
I think by his conduct of not being here to defend himself speaks a lot. I'll second the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Did we miss any of these?
No, ma'am, I think you got them all.
In one
Are you
day?
sure? Got them all.
One day.
Okay.
Oh, God is good.
Double check the list.
Checked it twice.
You checked it
Okay.
twice? Thank you.
Can I add one thing? into
Oh, I
that?
do need to say
I'm sorry.
something else. Oh, not that. It's a housing agreement list. I thought it was my title. When the challenge is sustained by the county board, the voter registration is changed to reflect the findings of the county board unless the matter is appealed. After appeal, the county board shall make any needed changes to the voter registration data. And, GS 163.9.2D, that the decisions of the county board of elections may be appealed either by the challenged voter or challenger to the Superior Court of the county within 10 days after the decision by the county board was rendered. It is not appealed to the state board of elections. So, does that mean we wait the 10 days?
This doesn't say it in here, but typically, when an order's done, you have a certificate of service. And it's usually in regular civil court, which I know I get into a mix of a mess here, but in typical civil court, if the judge gives a judgment, and 2 weeks later, it's signed, then I'll do a certificate of service and count 3 days for regular first class mail, and then 10 days from there.
Okay.
So, we will
So
get,
should we, it says after appeal. So does that mean we go ahead and change it now?
shall be appealable to the Superior Court.
Excuse me.
Help me out with that.
What I'm asking is, do we wait the 10 days to remove the names, or we, except for the girl who asked to have her voluntarily
I would think you could go ahead and
remove them, and then if it's appealed, we change it?
Yeah, I mean, I might want some clarification from somebody else, but I would think you would go ahead and do that now.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Now, would you, sorry, I just.
Yes,
wanted
ma'am, I'd
make
like
sure
to
that-
thank the board for their time today. I'd like to thank them for their patience. And I'd like to thank the board for their courage. One thing I'd like to point out, there's been a lot of talk about this being partisan politics. If you go back and look at the registrations for these folks, you'll find that there are Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. This was not directed towards any one race or political affiliation or anything else. We had, by the law, by the definition of the law, we had 57 acts of voter fraud uncovered today. You got a lot of young people on here that, we have a lot of young people on here who are trying to do the right thing, and they're getting either bad advice or they're not educated. We gotta start educating our young folks and letting them know what the rules are and what the requirements are. And quit letting people whisper in their ear and take advantage of them. If you look at the girl that we talked about earlier, Ileana Thomas, if you look at her resume, I will tell you what, she is an amazing young lady. She's accomplished a lot in her life. She's an accountant for one of the largest entertainment firms in California. Is it fair to send her to jail for 5 years? You talk about ruining. So what if only 1 or 2 people off this 60-person list have to go to jail? Or they decide we're going to make an example out of them. So what have we done? We're putting young folks in jeopardy. I work for the Department of Defense. You're not going to get a security clearance with a felony on your record. We're putting these people's lives and careers in jeopardy by giving them bad advice and not educating them. My goal is to meet with the college after this and start giving some voter education. There'll be a new board shortly. I would encourage the new board to follow along with the old board and get with the college, start educating these young folks. They're young adults now, they're not kids. But they don't know the law and they don't know the rules. Hell, we said, how many years we've been doing this? And we don't know all the law. The law changes, the rules change every 10 minutes.
I learned something every year, and we have.
So let's educate the kids. I do too.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. It's not partisan politics, but we have 57 people that voted in the November election and stood before an elections official and committed perjury. 57. That's terrible.
Did all these people vote? I know that there was a
All
challenge.
of
right,
them
we
voted.
arrested all of them voted.
All of them, well, one of them voted in Florida, I'm sorry.
No, he didn't. There was about 3 that didn't vote.
Okay.
To most of them did.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of them did vote.
Okay.
So they stood before an elections official and they asked him, what is your address? And they said 1704. And by the evidence, we've shown it wasn't. We need to educate them. You can vote at home. Miss Godfrey, she didn't testify about it, but I think y'all had some incidents where the kids come in and tried to register and use their home address and were sent back. And so get back in there, you're going to vote here. That's bad advice. And it's taking advantage of them. We got to stop. We got to stop it. Whoever's doing it, we got to stop. So I'm here. My goal in the next 2 years is to educate these kids, and I'm going to work hard doing it. So I'm asking for y'all folks' help.
And it is not just here, that is a problem in every town that has
We got
a college.
to fix your home first. You gotta fix home first.
But it seemed to be, you showed a pattern in the people that you challenged, that so many of them had already graduated. And I will say, I know that Dr. Gilchrist has really said he even said in the paper recently, he wants to make sure the students are better educated.
There needs to be a better application of the law. We were never told that we could question students about their intent for residency.
Anyway, I thank everyone
Thank
for
everybody for
coming
your time. Thank you.
today, and I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Kelly, for putting the books together. That helped a lot.
Take my list for that.
Yes, that was a good copy of our email. That helped a lot, thank you guys. Betsy and Pete, thank you for the books, that helped a lot. Between the books, y'all's and Dave's and Kelly's, they
I'm
really
taking
helped.
off tomorrow. Don't come tomorrow.
I won't, I promise
My dog
that.
has a seizure this week.
Thank you. Larry, how we doing? A bunch of them are shifting. Okay. Well, I'm gonna take that one right now, those are mistakes.
Hey, Hon,
Don't look up underneath the record. That was one.
You already
The
looked?
rest of them was about things.
We don't have.
Hopefully ain't nothing hooked to the start. Hopefully there's no C4 on it.
Oh, okay.
No.
Alright, yes.
You say new boards?
Harry, yeah, okay.
Very, very good. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, they turned back my ballot. When I voted, they turned it back.
Okay.
They denied
We've got, actually, I've got some here today. Did you meet Claire earlier?
Nice to meet you.